Mayor Allen, as soon as we have quorum of council on camera, we can start the meeting.
1, 2. B. Okay. Call the meeting to order. Can I move her seconder to do that, please? Councillor Moore, Councillor Ritchie, that the special meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of September 1st, 2021 come to order at 4:05 p.m. All those in favor? Is carried. Due to COVID-19, Council is taking the necessary steps to limit in-person meetings. As such, members of Council and staff are streaming this meeting live. You can watch the meeting live on the Township's website at www.springwater.ca. You can listen to it by telephone by dialing 647-558-0588 and use the following meeting identification 819-2776-3165 and the pound sign. This option is available during the meeting. Those unable to watch the live stream or listen to it are encouraged to review the meeting at their convenience by watching the video on the Township's YouTube channel. Council, any disclosure of pecuniary interests? All right, I see none. So we turn to the action reports, the official plan review update, background study, receipt and acceptance. I'll turn it over to Director Spagnell to introduce this matter, please.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. The purpose of the report is to introduce the background studies for the population-related employment market study, the Intensification Strategy, and the Bayfield Street Corridor Study. Council will recall that there were outreach sessions to stakeholders in February 23rd, 2021, whereby interested stakeholders were provided the opportunity to submit comments for consideration and for response from the Township's consulting planning firm WSP, who is working on the official plan review process. Based on the review of those comments, there have been some revisions completed to the draft or to the background studies. And Greg Bender is with us today from WSP to provide a presentation to go over some of those responses and the comments that were generated through the stakeholder meeting process, with the intended purpose and expectation to have council receive and accept the reports so that WSP can move on to drafting the new official plan. I'll now turn it over to Mr. Bender from WSP, who has prepared a presentation. Staff and Mr. Bender will be available to answer any questions that council may have. And we'll leave it up to council to decide whether or not you'd rather ask questions during the presentation or after, but we are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Bender.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate the introduction. Madam Clerk, can you confirm if I'm to share my screen or if you're going to share the presentation?
Yes, please go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, so let's see how this is going to work. We'll get there. Thank you very much, Your Worship, members of Council. Pleasure to see you today. As Director Spagno mentioned, the intent is to give you a bit of an update on the official plan review project, but primarily summarize the comments and the revisions as it relates to the outreach on the background studies with the intent of moving forward so we may draft the new official plan. We're going to talk a bit about next steps and then obviously questions and discussions. I can't see everyone, so if there are any particular questions, not certainly trying to direct the conversation, but you're welcome to interrupt, just so you don't miss the opportunity. So as Director Spagno mentioned, the intent is to really discuss a summary of the comments, how they've been addressed in the 3 background studies: the population-related employment market study, intensification strategy, and the Bayfield corridor study. It was meant to inform council, public, and stakeholders of next steps and how to stay engaged throughout the rest of the process. As you're more than well aware, this official plan review was undertaken through, or is to be undertaken through 2 phases. The phase 1 was the preparatory work, which included visioning workshops, growth management strategy, discussion paper, open house section 26, and sort of finalizing those documents in order to move towards phase 2, which is to prepare the 3 background reports and then draft the official plan with obviously the necessary outreach, public interface engagement sessions to discuss the document. So between October 1st, 2020 and June 29th of this year, we received a number of comments from about 19 individuals or organizations. They relate to any property owners, so individual property owners, a couple of, the township committees, the Committee of Adjustment, County of Simcoe, our friends at the ministry, and NVCA. And we'll talk, I'm not addressing each comment individually, but moreover, just going to summarize what some of the comments were and how they were addressed. So I'm going to organize this through 3 of the background studies, starting with the population-related employment market study. A few comments questioned whether economic activity within the township could be accurately predicted due to the pandemic. Generally speaking, what we found is that the demand for these types of uses by local residents is unlikely to be affected because they primarily serve local residents. So we did not see that there would be any impact related to COVID because of the sort of the local focus of these types of uses. Comments related to the purpose and subject matter of this study. And one of our responses would be is that this study is not intended to recommend incentives for attracting business, because some of the questions related to how can we attract businesses to this area. It's more just looking at sort of regional scale retail centers, not looking at the focus on regional scale retail centers, and more just how sort of the land use framework and how they could be accommodated in the future. The intensification strategy received a number of comments, primarily as it relates to individual areas within the township. Some requested clarification as to why Midhurst and Elmville are the only areas identified for greater intensification. And that relates to really the direction from the growth plan and the county. So since Elmville and Midhurst are the only delineated built up areas, so the areas that really can focus intensification, that's why we had to identify those. There are no other areas currently within the township that can be, where intensification can be directed. It doesn't mean it can't happen, it just means it can't be directed based on the work that we have to do. Another question that we received relates to Hillsdale and sort of the servicing for Hillsdale and the potential to reclassify it as a delineated or with a delineated built boundary in the future. And it's not, what I'm suggesting is that as part of this exercise, we cannot do that. However, we did identify some narrative in the background study to talk about how this could be accommodated in the future. And really it's to engage the county as part of their municipal comprehensive review to ensure that this is part of that conversation, because that's the sort of the opportunity to address this moving forward. It's not something that the township has the ability to do right now, but certainly in the future, it could be part of that conversation. There was some sort of comments sort of in opposition to the recommendations related to any future expansion of any medium and high density residential designations within the Midhurst secondary plan. And I will note that it's actually not our intent to expand these designations. We're just looking to keep these as they exist. So intensification strategy suggested that any expansion, if they are desirable, could be accommodated in the future, but at this time, we're not looking to expand those. Oops, sorry. In terms of the Bayfield Street corridor study, which I will admit probably received the vast number of comments, they did relate, to individual property owner requests to include their property within the study area boundary. In fact, the properties that we were requested to be included were actually supposed to be included. We just actually mapped it in error. So we did correct that boundary, and they were included as part of the study area. For obvious reasons, given the authority having jurisdiction over the corridor, one of the questions relates to how this streetscape or cross section could actually be realized in the future. And I will note that this is I'm not calling this, it's sort of a vision for the corridor. It doesn't mean this is going to happen tomorrow or 10 years from now or even 20. It's really just to help that discussion to see how the township would like to see this corridor in the future. It does acknowledge, obviously, that Bayfield is a provincial highway, and any alterations will require coordination and obviously cooperation and approval from the province. Again, they're obviously a stakeholder, a significant partner in this exercise, but the township does need to understand how you want to see the corridor evolve over time. There were a number of alternative ideas for the corridor design as it relates to distribution of traffic, to avoid that slowing of traffic through Midhurst. Obviously, if you're changing the streetscape significantly as we proposed, it will have impacts on traffic flow. Certainly, it's not going to be maintained as a highway if this was realized. And we've determined that if it were to be maintained as a highway, so to speak, with current sort of speeds being maintained, we don't feel it would actually serve the township well in terms of the overall build out and form and function of the corridor. So we've recommended that the recommendations proceed as proposed, because we do want to see Bayfield corridor as sort of a mixed use pedestrian friendly main street, which you can't have when you have cars speeding through this particular area. There were concerns raised regarding congestion and servicing capacity resulting from proposed intensification. I will certainly note, as we do in the report, that servicing is a huge component of this. You obviously can't accommodate the development without the servicing capacity. But again, being that this is visioning, the idea would be for the township to work towards servicing, achieving the servicing capacity to meet the potential growth opportunities. So it's really just to demonstrate how new development could occur. Servicing will be undertaken over time to ensure that it could be realized. If there's no servicing, I think it would be very difficult to accommodate this. There were also general comments related to the purpose of the corridor study. And just to be very clear, the study will not result in any immediate changes to land use designations along Bayfield. The intent is to provide a vision, as I've mentioned, for redevelopment and guidance to landowners. It's not meant to, again, be enacted and developed tomorrow. It's meant to serve the community for the long term. And any new development, regardless of the designation that's proposed in the new official plan, will need to be supported by a number of studies, so traffic, servicing, et cetera, prior to any approval. So there is certainly a number of studies and processes to support future development, but it's important to understand what that future development could look like over time. There were also sort of general or comments related to the official plan and the township zoning bylaw. The comments related to the official plan generally were requests to have designations changed. And I will say this is common through the number of official plans that we've prepared. The official plan review process is not generally intended as an opportunity to grant site-specific amendments. Because of the implications of a land use change, they should go through the planning process. So to submit an application and to follow that process. There were also comments requested to change the zoning bylaw. Obviously, this is the official plan review. There would be no zoning amendments as part of this. Certainly, the township will be obliged to go through a zoning bylaw review after the official plan. And certainly that could be entertained, not only to conform to the new official plan, but perhaps consider some of the changes that have been requested as part of this process. So in summary, in most cases, we were able to address comments through revisions to the background reports. I will say that, most of the comments didn't result in major changes, but just generally minor or some tweaks, as I mentioned. Other comments as they relate to just general official plan direction, any general policies, they will be addressed through the draft OP update that we're going to proceed should we get the authorization to do so. I will also note that a comment response table has been provided as part of our memo that we prepared to provide an opportunity for people who submitted comments to understand how they have been considered or addressed and what perhaps opportunities there may be to further that conversation. So in terms of next steps, Council certainly has the opportunity to receive the background studies that we've discussed and to provide direction to proceed to prepare the new official plan. We certainly are going to continue engagement with yourselves and with stakeholders and the public as part of the next sort of stage of the project. Once we do that, we'll look to sort of finalize the official plan and draft, and then move forward with the sort of the statutory process by having statutory public meeting and then council adoption prior to it being forwarded to the county for approval. So your worship and members of council, that concludes my presentation. In terms of the schedule, I will note that this might need to be revised slightly, but we're still aiming as best as we can to try and sort of complete this process by the end of this year. So being that we were looking to have a lot of the deliverables prepared over the summer and completed over the summer, there has been a little bit of delay in terms of engagement with yourselves and the receipt of additional comments. So we are going to try our best to prepare the draft official plan over the next month or so, with the aim to really have some of the consultation and have a draft for you to look at in the fall. Then moving forward to that statutory process and looking to finalize in December. I will say if there are some delays, if this were to carry forward into 2022, I certainly don't. My intent would be not to have this proceed too much further into 2022, because the idea we don't want to certainly be impacted by the municipal election. Now that concludes my presentation, Your Worship and members of council. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Bender. I'll open it up to council for questions, comments. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mr. Bender. Mr. Bender, on the Bayfield corridor, I see it as two objectives, if you like. One is the commercial development, businesses along both sides of the highway, or at least on the west side of the highway, and depending what happens on the east side, depends what happens on the west side with Curry's and so on. Where you and I are going to separate ways here is to do with the provincial highway becoming a main street. I just don't think that's realistic. And I question why you rejected, if you like, in your summations there, the idea of having a parallel road to service the commercial properties that we built there. Why would you not support parallel service road?
Mr. Bender.
Through your worship to Councillor Hannah. So as I mentioned, the intent was to sort of transition this particular road into a sort of main street for the township. It's happened throughout Ontario in a number of different communities. We didn't feel like this would necessarily be a stretch, but you can't achieve a local, a main street with a enhanced public realm and a streetscape that's going to accommodate local commercial development if you have a highway bisecting it. That's our thought on that, which is why we did not. Again, this is just a recommendation for consideration in the future.
I appreciate that, and I think in your, I think it's called the summary memo. In there, in two locations, people have submitted questions with regard to the traffic flow and so on, and I believe your response in two places where people would find another route. To be honest with you, in my opinion, there is no other route going north and south through Springwater than Bayfield Street. we're going forward with the Midhurst secondary plan. We're going to increase our population by 20,000, and there's not one new arterial road running north and south. If you try to direct traffic in other routes, you're going to have to take them all the way over to the 400 highway, which is probably not reasonable for people coming down, say, from Stayner and Elmville and so on. You can't put them down St. Vincent. You can't put them down Wilson Drive, which is both two-lane. One's a county road, one's a township road. But basically, the road running St. Vincent running through Midhurst is a subdivision street. It's not a arterial road. I'm just suggesting that the commercial ideas make sense, but the arterial road, being a provincial highway, making that a main street, absolutely, I cannot accept this proposal going forward where it says we have to accept it and receive it. I can receive it. I can't accept it if this proposal in there is to make a provincial highway, which is going to be 5 lanes shortly, and you're going to make that into a main street. I just don't think it's realistic. That's my opinion on that anyway.
Mr. Bender, what speed reductions would there be through the core, if any?
And so in response to you, Your Worship, and perhaps in response to Councillor Hanna, a couple of things we didn't analyze. Like there's already an existing, I believe Director Spagnol, there's a transportation study being undertaken in this particular area. We did not study the sort of the reduction of speed limits in this area. The intent was primarily to implement the direction of your current Midhurst secondary plan, which envisages this street as a local street. That's where we primarily got that direction from.
Director Spagnol?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I think I'd just like to add to that, and just to build on Mr. Bender's points, that this is a visioning exercise with respect to the corridor study. Further review and study will have to occur to deal with any transportation matters along the corridor. And it's at that point in time where considerations such as rerouting and possible options would be looked at to deal with, you know, the direction of traffic and to try to achieve the vision that's being proposed through the corridor study. So at this point in time, the study isn't intended to really get into the weeds on the technical aspects and the engineering and how that will work from a transportation perspective. It is to provide that overarching vision as to what could be possibly achieved, subject to further review as it relates to things such as transportation, access, which will all require feedback from the Ministry of Transportation and the applicable authorities.
Follow on, Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mr. Spagnol. Mr. Spagnol, where do you see possibility of any rerouting? There is no new arterial roads, as you know, that were when the Midhurst secondary plan were developed. I guess we fell short in not trying to find out some new routes, having the developers, if you like, help pay for some new routes. Right now, there's no routes, and I don't see where you could possibly reroute it. But if I'm wrong, please tell me where you're thinking that could happen.
Director Spagnol.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and through you to Councillor Hanna. I guess the first thing I would say is, well, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a specialist in transportation. I would leave it up to the engineers to take a look at that and review that and study what might be the appropriate way to deal with the traffic volumes that are being dealt with, while trying to achieve the vision that's been presented through this background study. In addition to that, I know that, you know, through discussions with the Ministry of Transportation, in order to facilitate you know, some of the aspects of mixed use commercial, they've provided indication as into controlled access. So in other words, limiting the number of access driveways along the corridor to provide for access in specific spots to reduce turning movements onto the highway. So I think my answer would be that it's not at this time that we are going to be finding those solutions, because it's at the point when we're looking at future development along the corridor that those types of considerations will have to be looked at by the engineers and by the professionals who have the expertise to deal with those traffic questions.
Let me just hear from CEO Schmidt and then follow on Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just further to Director Spagnol's comments, in recent discussions with our new GM of Infrastructure and Operational Services, Mr. Ramdio, we have had discussions about bringing forward the possibility of moving forward with a transportation master plan in the 2022 budget, which again would hopefully provide for some further insight as it relates to transportation throughout the township of Springwater. So all subject to obviously council's approval. So we are looking at developing some of these master plans, whether it be transportation and or water and wastewater, and those will be provided through our deliberations through budget in 2022.
Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate CEO Schmidt and Director Spagnol's comments. If we're going to do a transportation study, then I would suggest before we approve the Bayfield corridor study, we should know what that transportation study is. Otherwise, we're not doing our due diligence. That's my first point. My second point is, as Director Spagnol points out, the provincial highways always have access control. So they limit the number of driveways and so on. That's why I believe that a service road on either side or both sides of the Bayfield Street corridor would be the most appropriate way to proceed. We'd be allowed to have then access to the commercial properties and commercial development. But again, as I say, I don't think this is realistic and I can't support it. Thank you.
Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Few comments I'd like to make. I did review the material. I found some of the comments were pretty good with respect to in particular, some of people asking why some places were being intensified and why others weren't and the reasons for it. What I did find that there were a number of comments with respect to the transportation through the Bayfield corridor, people getting back and forth. There is no real alternative route in that area. So suggesting that if it slows down there, that people just find an alternate route, there really isn't one. And it also defeats the purpose of those businesses that are already developed there that do in fact get a business from some of the people that are passing through transiently, in particular on the weekend, maybe heading to the cottage or whatever. And it seemed somewhat dismissive when the report would just simply state that they'd kind of been asked to look at a pedestrian-friendly main street. And I guess what I'm thinking here is there's tens of thousands of new residents, and this is something maybe Springwater should be thinking about, tens of thousands of new residents coming to Springwater, and there is an opportunity to have, from the ground up, on basically a blank canvas, a stretch that would be exactly as Mr. Bender has described in another area of Springwater in the Midhurst area, maybe between Highway 26 and one of the major thoroughfares that are likely to be developed, or major corridor likely to be developed between 26 and Highway 400 at a future date, where from the ground up there could be a strip with boutiques, with almost like a little entertainment district from the ground up, rather than trying to basically mow the province's grass with the lawnmower of our choice, which really the provincial government's going to dictate what's going to happen in that corridor. The other thing is that I did a bit of research online, and I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of figures, but I did look at the traffic data information for Bayfield Street at the city limits, and in 1988, the summer average daily traffic was 17,300 vehicles. That was in 88. In 2010, which is as far as that particular data went, that number had increased to 21,200. We're 11 years past that date now. I'd hazard that we'd be up around 35, 40,000 or more vehicles per day passing that particular stretch. When we talk about winter time, winter average daily traffic in 1988, keeping in mind a lot of people bring their snowmobiles up here, was 11,000 per day. And in 2010, that number climbed to 17,900. Once again, if we look at what we're at today, 11 years later, it'll be a much, much higher number. So I do struggle with that. I also would like to refer to one of the reports that was used to develop this plan. The employment study report, and I'm going to read from page 3.8 what they had to say here, which kind of seems to be counterintuitive to what we're kind of looking at here. I think it's a great idea, but not at that location. It's just, I can't see it being something that could be done. But intensification opportunities. The Bayfield Street corridor within Midhurst is a major arterial road that connects Bayfield Street with the city of Barrie. As previously mentioned, a major retail and commercial service corridor. The Midhurst Bayfield Street corridor is envisioned to accommodate intensification and high order retail and commercial services. Due to highway restrictions, bracket, restrictions renumber of highway entrances, bracket, and the nature of the high-speed road, the Bayfield Street corridor likely does not have the potential to accommodate a traditional Main Street downtown. That's the first part of that. The potential for intensification within the Bayfield Street corridor would likely include the opportunity to create large blocks of complexes that would become a destination for locals and travelers rather than just a thoroughfare. And I would envision these to be large commercial areas with one entrance, but servicing a number of buildings. So in as much as a lot of the report has merit, that particular aspect, trying to define the Bayfield Street corridor as something similar, and the only vision I have is what we have over in down on Highway 7 east of the 400, where they have public transit. It's an entire entertainment area complex for shopping. There's high rises and businesses there, as well as public transit at the Metro North subway station, where they've redesigned that road. And it lends itself to that. But Highway 26 in that area doesn't. The other thing I had some difficulty with, and I alluded to this before, was when we speak about the amount of commercial and retail space in Elmvale. And when we looked at that, we use an aggregate number. However, the aggregate number used to define that retail commercial space seems adequate, except for the fact that you might not find a suitable piece of property put in certain businesses, such as another grocery store. On an aggregate basis, there's lots of square footage, but on a per lot basis, it really does define and limit the number of businesses that can come into Barrie. So there's a couple of things there that I had trouble with the report. So I really can't support it the way it's currently phased. And the way our recommendation is, it basically says that we're adopting this report as a council. And although I can certainly see the intensification down on Bayfield Street, that's great stuff. With limited entrance and egress from larger commercial areas. I don't see it being a pedestrian-friendly area, although I do envision that that might be something that could be put in place elsewhere in the Midhurst area as the development grows down the road with boutiques, restaurants, microbreweries, all that kind of stuff in a little strip. That would be inviting for residents to go there, as well as outside residents from other jurisdictions as well.
Okay, lots of points there. Thank you, Councillor. It seems this transportation, this throughfare of the highway is an issue that is preventing some of us to feel comfortable accepting this report and just saying wait till later clarification. Mr. Bender, do you have any comments with respect to what Councillor Hanna or Councillor Cabral have brought up?
Through your worship to both councillors, I think in terms of the perhaps perception of contradiction between the two reports, one, as we've talked about, one is a report to inform the official plan. The other is a long-term visioning document. The report is quite right. You can't have a local main street within the current context. It's not possible. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen in addition to transportation studies, even more detailed land use framework configurations, and obviously the discussions with MTO. That's primarily why that recommendation or that statement is in there, because you can't do that right now. I would argue, given the direction from the Midhurst secondary plan, this was seen as a township's Midhurst Main Street. That was why we took this particular corridor study and developed something that you can see today. As I mentioned, without developing a visioning study, this will never change. You won't have that background work, that discussion. Sure, it can be refined over time, and even if it's adopted or received today, and I don't mean to speak for your specific protocols, but doesn't mean it can't change. And certainly, the official plan is not going to necessarily change in any regard, because it's the secondary plan that would have to be changed through the particular process. So whether it's adopted or received in any way, shape, or form, it's not going to form part of the official plan necessarily because of its visioning aspects. So what we would be doing in the official plan review is looking to implement the Midhurst secondary plan, perhaps in more detail. This is somewhat part of the official plan review, but not necessarily going to be implemented through the official plan review. The comment about Highway 7 is an interesting one, but admittedly, and I don't mean to speak for whomever, whether that be Vaughan or even showing in Richmond Hill or Markham, where Highway 7 has changed significantly, I think, and I don't mean to speak for any of the planners there, they want that to be a main street. And that corridor certainly will change significantly over time. But they also did an examination of that corridor many, many years ago, and it's taken a significant amount of time to get where they are. And it's going to change probably again and again and again over the next decades. So without studying it and trying to figure out what the township wants over time, it's important. Without doing that, it'll be very, very difficult to have that conversation. At least you have something to say, I like it, I don't like it, I think it could change, but it is that starting point for that visioning work.
Follow on, Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. It's actually in regards to the comments that were being made, and it just struck me there was a number of comments made here with respect to certain specific areas of the final report that appear to be made by the Township of Springwater Planning and Development Advisory Committee. And I don't recall seeing these comments prior to this. I'm just wondering, are these official comments made on behalf of Springwater Township that I'm reading here? Or are these, how did they get in there? I'm just wondering why I'm seeing the Township of Springwater Planning and Development Advisory Committee in a number of locations. Not that they're not allowed to comment, certainly they are, but I haven't seen that particular, these particular comments prior to, and I'm wondering if they were made, because I do read the minutes, if they were made on behalf of Springwater Township or not. So I'm just wondering if anybody can shed some light on that particular thing. I meant to bring it up before.
Director Spagnol, any clarification there?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Allen. Through to Councillor Cabral. The Planning Advisory Committee was put together to provide residents and also includes specific councillors. And it was put in place to provide them with the opportunity to provide input into the official plan review process. By no stretch does that represent the comments of council or the official comments of the township. Those are the comments provided by that specific planning advisory committee that was put together to provide input into the official plan review process and other planning matters that are ongoing in the municipality.
Thank you.
Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor. If I threw you, Mayor, to Councillor Cabell. I'm on that committee, and the mayor was part of that discussions, and so was Director Spagnell. And I can tell you my position on that committee when it came to the commercial development was in agreement, but when it comes to the Bayfield Street corridor, the provincial highway becoming a main street, absolutely, I did not agree with it then. I don't agree with it now. I don't recall the mayor or either agreeing with that. So that comment was not submitted, in my view anyway, on behalf of everybody on that committee. I'm not certain who submitted it, but I can suggest that I was on that committee and I still don't agree that that was appropriate thing, even though it's a long range vision. I'm not going to agree to this tonight because you can't accept this and then expect in the future other councils not being binded by it. So that's my comment on that.
So Director Spagnell or Mr. Bender, we seem to be having a problem holding our noses and accepting this visioning statement when there's questions concern about the main thoroughfare through the corridor. So where do we go to reconcile that issue?
Well, Mayor Allen, I think, and again, I think there's got to be an understanding and recognition that this is not a final end all and be all report. As noted, it's a visioning exercise of things that we would need to look at as a municipality in order to try to accommodate that vision. There are instances, and I've seen it in the municipality since I've been here, where we looked at things and said, that will never happen. And it did. And there were ways to try to work through different issues and different aspects at that time through the planning process to try to solve problems and solve some of the issues that were raised through discussions such as this, which are worthwhile because they raise the issue that is at hand. And really that is the purpose of these visioning documents, is to identify the vision and within those discussions identify what needs to be sorted out in order to try to create that vision and have it come to fruition. So I think really it does come down from an acceptance of council as a whole that this is a visioning exercise and that what's there might not necessarily happen, but at least it provides some form of objectives for the municipality to work forward to. The first thing I'll point to is we've got the township property and the hasty track on the corner, which builds on this. If the direction of council and the township at this point is to create a downtown, then this visioning document is imperative to try to foster that and provide the necessary background and vision to try to build on that and see it happen. So to my mind, I think it's really just a recognition that this is a visioning document and that council will have the opportunity, pending council's receipt of the reports, to provide comment on official plan policies as they come about through the drafting of the official plan, and also have the ability to, to have the comments go on as part of the record, that the transportation aspects really do need to be sorted out in order to foster this vision. So I really do think it's the recognition of that and seeing that really the receipt of these reports is required so that we can move forward to get the OP up and running in draft form, and also to try to focus in on some of those issues that were raised as part of Councillor Hanna's and Councillor Cabell's comments.
Okay, Councillor Ritchie, did you have your card up? I see Councillor
Yes,
Moore.
I did. Thank you, Mayor Allen. My concern about this, when I read it, is, and Councillor Cabral kind of highlighted that there earlier about, if I can use the word aggregate, that there's enough land suitable without any expansion in the south end of Elmville, and yet we've made notion and notified the county in their municipal comprehensive review. So if we agree to this, then we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot to the MCR that we've pushed forward to the county to take a look at. So we say one thing and we do the next. I find this to be a little ambiguous here. So I can't support this. I'd rather wait and see where the county comes back to us with their MCR. And I've been a strong believer with that. I don't care about their studies. Like, we see it. Councillor Cabral has mentioned it several times. So vision or no vision, it's not my vision, and I will not support this going forward.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I do remember the other visioning exercise that the county came to us with not so long ago. And it was similar. And I'm wondering in their vision of the Bayfield Street corridor. So I'm wondering if Mr. Bender had referenced that exercise that the county had already gone through and took into consideration what they were recommending.
Mr. Bender?
Mayor Allen, if you give me a minute, I'd like to respond to Councillor Ritchie's comment about perhaps what the recommendations are as part of this report, but also how it might inform the county's MCR. And then I might respond, then I will respond to Councillor Moore's comment. If that's okay.
Go ahead, please.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Ritchie, the intent of this exercise is to conform to the existing county official plan, which is horizon is to 2031. The exercise they're going through right now is to examine growth in the county to 2051. So another 20 years. So as of now, we believe the township has enough land to 2031. To 2051, that's anybody's guess because they're going through that work. That's why we recommended what we did. And then just to respond to Councillor Moore.
Well, just pause right there. Follow
Sure.
on by Councillor Ritchie. We'll
I just want to comment on that. I don't agree with the 2031. You're making a recommendation. They're saying we're good till 2031. We're not. We're short right now. So, whatever way you want to dress it up, whatever way you want to throw it out there, it's not. We need to look at this. And, if we accept this, then what does it say to the MCR? Well, we changed our minds. We haven't changed our minds. And we don't have enough room till 2031. That's the whole point I'm trying to make. So I'm in disagreement with that, and I will not support it. Thank you.
Director Spagnell?
Mayor Allen, through you to Councillor Ritchie. The MCR process is scheduled to be finalized July 2022. Whether or not they hit that time frame, we don't know. So there's two things here. The first thing is that the township official plan is in desperate need of being updated, or we're in desperate need of a new official plan because it is extremely dated. The second thing is that as a result of the county's MCR process, municipalities around the county will be required to update their official plans to reflect whatever the findings are that come out of the county's MCR initiative. So the comments that have been provided as part of the MCR process have been essentially parsed off as comments associated with the MCR because we can't deal with those through our official plan review process because the county at the end of the day is the approval authority. And if they do not agree with it, they will not approve it. So that is why the comments have been vetted through the MCR process, and the comments were structured in that way so that the county does know that the comments of council with respect to Elmvale and the commercial and the expansion and the Bayfield Street corridor in the Greenbelt are to be considered through the MCR process separate from the township's official plan review. So as a township, that has been qualified. And by no stretch does what comes out of our local official plan dictate or have an influence on the county's MCR process, because that has to be dealt with separately on its own, because that is their own process.
Okay, Mr. Bender, responding to Councillor Moore's point.
Certainly, and thank you, Mayor Allen, through you to Councillor Moore. That's a very good question. Not to direct questions to others, but I wonder if Director Spagnell would be so kind as to perhaps respond to that, because if it formed part of the information that we reviewed as part of the study, I would say yes, but I'm not aware of necessarily that meeting and that discussion.
Director Spagnell?
I think, Mayor Allen, I'd have to get more information as to what presentation that was and what visioning exercise was completed by the county. I know the county has been going through a transportation plan countywide, which is recent. I know that they have done a lot of work with respect to rural cross sections and providing for pedestrian friendly roadways, but I'm not aware of any visioning that the county would have done with respect to the Midhurst corridor or the Bayfield Street corridor in Midhurst. The reason why I need more information on that is because typically the county would not go through a visioning exercise such as this because that's tied to a local official plan.
You were
So I
referring to
would
that,
like to, I just need more information on what the visioning was.
Councillor Moore?
Sorry, and I'm hoping I'm not mistaken, but I'm referring to the presentation that was brought to council by county representatives. And part of that presentation was about the Bayfield corridor and what that looked like. They showed us pictures, and there was cycling and pedestrians. There was a center island. And I have two questions. So that's my first question. If I can just throw out my second question to Mr. Bender is, was there, I did go through your report, but I don't see anything about industrial properties. And so I'm wondering if that was just outside of what it was we had asked you to do. So I saw the employment related, but not specific to industrial properties.
Yeah, and through you, Mayor Allen, to Councillor Moore, that's a very good question. The scope of the assignment was to really look at this as a mixed-use corridor. There certainly are employment lands that will be maintained and retained for the long term, but we were only to look at really a sort of a small area coincident with the corridor.
Okay, thank you. Could I please have my first question? I think maybe Director Spagnuol remembered the presentation I was referring to.
Director Spagnol?
Thank you, Marilyn. I think what Councillor Moore is referring to, and as I said, if this is it, is the stakeholder outreach sessions that were held in February 23rd, 2021. It was through this process that those outreach sessions were held, and where there was a schematic shown that depicted how the road allowance could possibly be split up to provide for walkways, trees, possibly transit, that sort of thing. The county has also provided similar type cross sections of roadways for highways and whatnot, where there's heavy volumes of traffic. But I can confirm that that was the outreach sessions held on February 23rd, 2021.
Okay, so we have to continue with the official plan review process. So how can we get over the consternation that has been expressed so that we can continue, Director Spagnol?
I think, Mayor Allen, as far as receiving the reports, what it does is it allows WSP to draft official plan policies. If there are any policies that certain council members or council does not want in the official plan or takes issue with, that will have to be considered once drafted. With that in mind, and I'll look to Mr. Bender just to confirm, but with that in mind, council does have the ability to either adopt those policies or not. So by accepting these reports, by no stretch is it approving the recommendations. It's simply receiving the reports to allow us to go through the next step to get a new official plan drafted, at which point council can provide their comments, and council as a whole can either move to have certain things removed to the, related to the issues expressed, and that can be debated and discussed once we get a draft official plan in hand. It's very tough, and I can appreciate this. It's very tough to see how this will all pan out unless you have an official plan and specific policies to review. And I would submit that it's at that point that council can decide which policies it feels it needs in as it relates to these studies, which ones it may want taken out. And then, of course, we would have to have a discussion about conformity with the upper tier policies and everything else that goes along with it. But by receiving the policies, it does give WSP the ability to work through and prepare a draft so that we can focus discussion on how those policies look.
Thank you, Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Merrill. I'm trying to run two here so I can keep track of everything. I mean, we have a word here that I haven't seen sometimes, and the word here is acceptance. If we want to receive this report, I can handle that, I think. But having the word acceptance in there, to my way of thinking, means that we're adopting what's inside that report. And with all due respect to Director Spagnol, it always seems that when we have a bit of a discussion where something doesn't feel quite right, quite often we end up saying, well, let's move ahead. And then when we see it again later, we'll see about tweaking it or getting rid of it. And I think that's part of the problem, is that in that report, the two aspects, one we've spoken to with respect to, about the corridor and the visioneering that was going on there that probably is better put elsewhere from the ground up to do that. And the other is the aggregate commercial retail space in Elmvale. I just want to say one thing with respect to that. And that was that when the beer store left, I did make a number of inquiries, and I spoke to a Brewers Retail or the beer store rep. And one of the reasons that had been alluded to that they didn't stay there was because they wanted to find another location, but there was no location within Springwater that was able to accept the large transport trucks for them to be able to deliver their product. And that's the reason why this aggregate number is very, very deceiving. So in my way of thinking, and I don't know about the other members of council, I think it's the word acceptance here that is really rattling me. So if that's the feeling is to leave that in there, I won't be moving forward with it myself.
Thank you. Just for clarification, why is the word receipt/acceptance there? Background study. Can somebody clarify that, Clerk Ainsworth? Just the wording of the motion there. Visual plan background study, receipt acceptance dated. What's the purpose of receipt/acceptance?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I will have to direct that to Director Spagnol.
Mayor Allen, I think, the words, to Councillor Cabral's suggestion, I don't see any issue with receipt. It was part of, when drafting it, it was felt that it was considered to be the same. Now, if council wants to delete the word accept, that's perfectly fine with staff. I mean, there's no issue there because you're simply receiving the report. And just to provide comment with respect to Councillor Cabral's comments on the commercial lands. The studies are really, again, they're a macro look at what is required and what is not required, I guess, from a commercial from a commercial aspect. Those studies are typically used when we receive development applications in specific areas to determine whether or not we require additional commercial to try to achieve and provide for any shortages that might be there. So that is when those studies are referred to. There may be policies that end up as part of a draft official plan that say that when you're looking at future development in that specific settlement area, that you provide for additional commercial space. And I don't want to put words in Mr. Bender's mouth, but he can verify for me that that might be the policy direction that comes out of that. So that when applications come in for development, there's guidance in the official plan as to what we need to do to ensure that things like transportation are dealt with and that there's adequate commercial space provided to support the population that will be coming in.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Coughlin and then Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, Marilyn. I think my comment was just more on the process moving forward, in that we take tonight's receipt of the proposal. And is it possible then to have it in the resolution that we move forward to discussions. Director Spagnell had talked that this evening is a macro look, which is going to have to become micro before any of this moves forward. Also, whether it's the commercial or the transportation, all of these things are going to need to be finalized. And I think that there's often, I know for myself anyway, apprehension to put your yes card up and approve something without knowing what the next step is. So I think that outlining what the next step is and that we're just forwarding this to the next step might help alleviate my concerns and maybe that of other members of council, so that we can ensure that this is just a step in the process and this is not finalizing any decision.
Comments, Director Spagnell and Mr. Bender?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I think that's a great way of putting it, that this is the next step, that nothing has been finally approved by moving this forward. It gets us to the next step to have a draft official plan to review, and it's not finalizing or approving anything.
Okay, Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, Mayor. And further to Councillor Cabell's observations, I first comment tonight on this subject, I pointed out the word accept. To me, that means approved. And I can't approve this the way it is tonight. And the other comment I'd like to make is that the first time this came forward about Bayfield Street being created into a main street, we had discussions with it. A number of members of council expressed concerns. My question was it wasn't realistic at the time. Now it's back in here again tonight. So I'm always concerned about when we let things go that we're going to end up approving them down the road. So I have a real problem with the corridor study being the way it's written. Certainly I support the commercial development, but I have a problem with trying to take a major provincial highway where, as Councillor Cabell pointed out, a number of years ago, the traffic volume on that road per day was 70,000. It's probably going to be over 100 now. And when we grow our Midhurst secondary plan by another 20,000 people, we're going to have a lot of traffic on that road. It's not realistic to try to convert it to a main street. I don't know how we're going to go forward tonight with that in there, but I'm certainly not going to vote on anything that says, in my mind, approved, which is accepted. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've removed acceptance from the first paragraph. And with the discussion, which has been good, it's loud and clear that we got to go back to the drawing board for the next step to address these concerns that have been expressed. I can't recall, did we have a mover and seconder to get this on the floor? No, we didn't. So can I have a mover and seconder, or did you want to last point, Councillor Cabral?
Yeah, Mayor Allen, the word acceptance is in both paragraphs. Just to point that out. If you're going to take it out one spot, I'd like to see it removed in two spots.
You accepted, yeah, okay, yep, good point, yep. Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you. The word accepted in the first paragraph is just due to the name, the actual title of the report. So that generally stays exactly how the report is titled. The approved piece in the second paragraph would be where I would recommend removing it.
Background study. So that's in fact the formal title, Mr. Bender, of that study?
Sorry, Your Worship. That the title of the study was just the corridor study. As for the terminology used in the report, I'd have to defer to Director Spagnell.
Clerk Ainsworth, you're clarify?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Allen. Just to clarify that the name in the first paragraph is the title of Director Spagnell's report. So that first paragraph is just stating that council is receiving the report itself, and removing the word acceptance from there. It wouldn't really have any end meaning to it, as it's just simply the name of the report that's on tonight's agenda.
Yeah, I take your point, but I think with the discussion we've had, it doesn't. The report really needs to not have the word acceptance in it. given the discussion we've had. Councillor Cabral?
Mayor Allen, I'm wondering if quotations around the entire thing might suffice, if that might.
Okay, yeah. All right, fair enough. Clerk Ainsworth, you got that? Okay, and then accepted is removed from the other. So a mover and seconder for this, please. Deputy Mayor Coghlan, Councillor Moore. That the report from the Director of Planning regarding the official plan review background study receipt / acceptance in quotation marks dated September 1, 2021 be received, and that the population related employment market study June 2021, intensification strategy October 2020, and Bayfield Street corridor study June 2021 be received to allow for preparation of a new draft official plan. All those in favor?
Recorded vote, please.
Okay. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. It'll just be one moment. Thank you. So when I state your name, please state yes or no. Councillor Cabral? You're on mute.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Councillor Ritchie?
No.
Councillor Chapman?
Yes.
Councillor Moore?
Yes.
Councillor Hannah?
No.
Deputy Mayor Coghlan?
Yes.
And Mayor Allen?
Yes.
That motion is carried.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bender and Director Spagnell. Mover and seconder for the confirmatory bylaw, please. Deputy Mayor Coghlan, Councillor Ma, that bylaw 2021-81 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the special council meeting held on September 1, 2021, listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? That is carried. And adjournment, mover and seconder. Councillor Moore, Councillor Cabral, that the special meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 5:10 p.m. to meet again in a regular meeting on September 1, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? That is carried. And again, did you say, Clerk Ainsworth, there's a separate link?
No, the 6:30 meeting, you will use the same link to enter
Same
into
link,
this meeting? Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
See you then.